With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Calling all true crime fans. True Crime Forum is coming to the Northeast, and if you're curious about true crime beyond the headlines, this is for you. Join us on Saturday the 12th of July at the stunning Blackfriars in Newcastle upon Tyne for a jam-packed day including insightful talks, seminars and interactive workshops. Be there to witness campaigner-led conversations, live podcasts, self-defense classes and so much more. There's truly something for every true crime fan. True Crime Forum Newcastle is designed to explore crime and justice through real-life stories, breaking down taboos, academic discussions, and practical hands-on classes. Oh yeah, and lunch is included. Expect stotties and chips to keep you going. Grab your ticket now. Visit northeasttruecrime.co.uk or Google True Crime Forum Newcastle and grab a ticket now. Come curious, leave inspired. True Crime Forum, July 12th, Blackfriars, Newcastle upon Tyne.
Hello and welcome to the Cult Vault Podcast, your dedicated podcast for uncovering the darkest corners of cults and coercive control. I'm your host, Kacey, and I want to start by thanking each and every one of you for tuning in. Your support fuels our deep dives into these critical issues. Before we get started, a word of caution. Today's episode may contain discussions on abuse, including graphic descriptions of abuse, and covers a variety of human rights violations that may be triggering for some listeners. Please consider this as a trigger warning and proceed with caution. I'm thrilled to announce that I'll be appearing at CrimeCon UK in London on the 7th and 8th of June 2025, and again in Manchester on the 27th of September 2025. Join me and a host of world-leading experts, advocates and noisemakers at the heart of the true crime community. This is the UK's biggest true crime event, and you won't want to miss it. Use the code CULT, C-U-L-T, for 10% off your tickets. And remember, there are flexible tickets and payment plans available to accommodate everyone. This incredible event is sponsored by True Crime, and it's always my favourite weekend of the year. I hope to see some of you there. And for those who want even more from the Cult Vault podcast, you can access early, ad-free content by supporting me at patreon.com/thecultvault, where every pledge not only gives you exclusive access, but also directly supports the continuation of this work. Thank you again for your support and your listenership. Now, let's unlock the vault. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Cult Vault podcast. I'm your host, Kacey, and this is the second interview of the day, but both are going to be very different. I'm really looking forward to introducing our new guest on the show, who's a new friend of the Cult Vault podcast, introduced to me by our other friend, Uncle Richter. Hello and welcome to the show, Cara.
Hello, thank you for having me, Kacey.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It's the afternoon for me. It's the morning for you. We've got a whole host of questions to get through. And I usually start by asking each guest to just introduce themselves to the listeners.
Yeah, my name is Cara Cordoni. I'm from San Francisco. I currently live up in Northern California. I'm a leadership coach, mom of 2 teens, and a cult hopper and activist.
I like that Cult Hopper made it in there, because without that sort of accolade, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. It's like you wear it as a badge of honor next to your activism, and I think that's really important when we come to talk about some of the activism work you're involved in later on. But to start off with, we're going to be going back to April 2021 when you attended your first ISTA retreat. I hadn't heard of ISTA until I started reading some of the publications that came out and subsequently your work on this group. So, what is ISTA? Is it an acronym? And what happened in April 21?
Yeah, so I had a difficult COVID lockdown relationship, and that ended right at the beginning of 21. And so I was kind of embarking on a healing journey. I took an online intimacy class, and someone in the chat, probably from the Bay Area, mentioned the International School of Temple Arts, which goes also by the acronym ISTA. And I looked up their website, and it was these beautiful, happy people dancing, and this retreat called the Sexual Shamanic Spiritual Experience, 7 days. And it really offered transformation, connection. They talked about tribe and community. And especially coming out of COVID, it was really exciting to think about gathering with people.
You were in this intimacy workshop and somebody wrote in the chat, do you think at this point that this was like an ISTA member that was deployed into these types of areas to potentially recruit? Or was it just somebody spreading like word of mouth? I did this, it was great.
Yeah, I really think it was someone that had probably attended and friends, and it's, very much word of mouth that ISTA has grown by.
Okay. And when you say cult hopper, would you include sort of the potentially coercive relationship during COVID as part of that cult hopping experience?
Yeah, I would say, I got married or got involved around age 24 with a spiritual leader, cult type, and ended up with him for a number of years. I would say that was a very coercive, harmful, he had a lot of narcissistic traits. The COVID relationship, is a dude struggling with alcoholism and triggered all my codependence. And yes, I think alcoholism people do use a lot of harmful, coercive language and behaviors, but I really think of it a little differently from the addiction perspective.
Right. Just interesting to hear all these different insights into different people's experiences. Oh, thank you for sharing that. The sexual shamanic retreat experience, is that what you called it?
And I'm not sure if I'm getting them in the right order. Sexual shamanic spiritual experience.
Spiritual experience. So really playing on that that satisfying alliteration there. Sexual shamanic spiritual experience. Do you think this is something that would appeal more to people that are looking to learn more about their sexuality or become more comfortable in their own bodies? We're kind of repressed, I think, as a race, especially women. So it's kind of, I remember first interviewing somebody from One Taste that I didn't really know how to talk about the clitoris stroking. So I don't know the best way to approach just talking about, sexual shamanic spiritual experience. Did you have an idea of what to expect from that title?
Oh, I mean, I think it set me up just to be really excited. I was like, oh, it's going to be wild, I guess, in terms of shamanism, and so that would implied altered states. They did say there would be breath work, and so yeah, I mean, I've worked with shaman in the past, one-on-one. I've been really interested in a lot of new age self-development, spiritual seeking, like a lot of folks. And it's led me down these paths. And I just thought, here's a group that is going around reducing sexual shame. Here's a group that is helping us, giving us tools to heal around our sexuality, like you said, especially as women, and to expand it. And I think the history with ISTA was a lot of very sex positive people that got involved. If you go back to the very beginning with Des, who founded it, and the Sedona Temple, that there was a lot of sex workers, and they were busted for prostitution back in the aughts.
When you attended this initial retreat, do you remember the experience of arriving by bus, or did you drive? And what was your first impression of the location of the first retreat?
So I went with my best friend and we drove, and it's a beautiful location called Lake County. And the retreat center is like an old carriage house. It was been a stop in California for a long time. People have gathered there. Beautiful land. We pulled up. There's like a little welcome table. People were very bright and shiny. Like a lot of these experiences, or at least ones I've talked about, they'll say, the journey begins as soon as you sign up. And so it kind of primes you and creates this ethos and attention, I think. And so I just showed up pretty excited and wired and nervous because here was this group of people, especially during COVID, where it was just really weird to gather.
There's not really many other ways to describe it. It was just a really weird period in history, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful location. It's a bit strange because we haven't really been around people. What were the first sort of activities that you participated in? Did you get shown to your room first, or was it like all systems go, we're going to go do breathing work, we're going to go and do a yoga class? How did it all kind of play out?
Yeah, so the beginning, everyone arrived, and then we were, directed to our rooms. I was sharing a bunk room with a bunch of people. So it was like, go upstairs, find a bunk. There were private bungalows that other people were in. So there was a variety of options. People were camping and, car camping and stuff. So there was a variety. We gathered in the Heart Lodge. So usually there's going to be a huge, gathering space, beautiful structure in kind of a heart shape or a big circle. And it was a large crop, I would say, because of the pent-up demand from COVID. So there were about 70 of us in a circle. And at one end of the circle was a couch set up with beautiful pillows and draperies. And the three facilitators were sitting on the couch. And it all began with reviewing the agreements. So there's like 19 or 20 agreements.
Okay.
I believe they had been sent out in advance, and I probably read over them rather quickly, but they take a lot of time to read each of them, discuss each of them, read it again, and then we would all agree with yes, hands, voice, right? So you really opt in. And I had a couple of thoughts. One that was funny is I looked at the circle and then I thought, oh yeah, this isn't a cult because there's 3 facilitators and they're women. It's 2 women and 1 guy. And so I had this little justification where I was like, oh, you can relax, right? This is different. The agreements, the one that was really shocking at the time and that has since changed, at least for level 1, was that facilitators, assistants could interact sexually with participants. And there was this explanation that it would be shared with the other facilitators, like it's under the group gaze. The idea being that in the world, we know teachers are having sex with students and they do it in the shadows, and they do it in the dark. However, here we're bringing it out into the light so it can be conscious. And the idea being that by multiple people knowing and that they have your best interest at heart, that somehow that's going to work out okay. And I marked that it was weird, but I didn't fight it, right? Like you've paid the money, you're in the circle. They explain it rather rationally. And so you're like, okay, we'll go along. Some of the other problematic agreements are the 100% responsibility for my experience, which I'm sure other people have brought up.
Gosh.
In Cult Dynamics, Osho, Landmark, different.
Yeah. Unless it's a positive experience, in which case leadership may take responsibility for that, Any negative experience is 100% on you. Any miracles or prosperity you experience was actually us, is the way I tend to hear it be said by cult survivors. But of course, that in itself is a big red flag statement. But I'm curious to know if you think that the social proofing was already at play when you were agreeing out loud in kind of like a almost conformity-inducing state with a group of 70 people for the first time being around people in however long, that when people read out these statements, if everybody is saying yes, like a big zealous, like yes, are you going to actually psychologically fight it at that point? I'm not sure.
Based on the research I've done since, when we look at social science, probably not. It's very few of us, given that they've proven you can show people different length lines. And if 20 people say that the little line is longer and it comes to you, very few of us, less than 1 in 5.
Yeah.
Look up the statistics, but it's the idea that, you're sovereign, you're independent, you can consent, and ignoring what's been proven about how social and influence, and it's like instinctual. It's not a critical thinking choice. It's like a current that we don't really talk about. And I think it really brings into question consent. What am I truly consenting? What am I consenting to? Is it informed consent? All of those come up in these situations.
Right. So this agreement, this sort of totalistic agreement to these rules is the consent. I assume that's kind of that they've taken that activity and they've said, well, you consented to this during that activity in the heart center,
the Heart Lodge.
Heart Lodge.
Yeah, I think they really do more around consent. So we dip into definitions of consent and Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. And we do some practice exercises, and I really loved them. I thought they were great. In retrospect, I would say it's not enough for the level of intensity of play or of risk that is set up in that space. I would have loved if we had done 3 days on consent, like there's a lot of cultural influence that we have to navigate around consent. But on the other hand, I think we're all also, in myself, like fiery and in a hurry to get to really exciting and intense and edgy activities. So there's a real tension there. Within even the participants showing up. But I think as a trustworthy, ethical leader and facilitator, we need to update our models around, these trainings, and especially large group awareness trainings. Like anyone that really wants to be an ethical in service of the participants, I think is going to stay away from a lot of these dynamics, or should.
That leads me perfectly into asking you about the leadership of ISTA and the history of ISTA, sort of where it came from. In regards to this small sort of footnote about how facilitators and leaders and people that are kind of what I would say are in those positions of power during these retreats are allowed to have sexual contact with you, or you give them permission to touch you sexually. I wonder where that footnote came from, if it's sort of like a teaching or part of the whole ISTA brand that came from the implementation at leadership and kind of filtered down to your first retreat in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, Des Nichols, who is the founder of ISTA, I've heard him, I don't know him personally, but based on his film, I want to call it Chasing Maya, but I don't think that's the right name. But it could be called that. There's the film that he has about himself. And from speaking with numbers of people now who have interacted with him directly and reading Maya Luna's book, Mud, Lotus from the Mud, Mud in the Lotus. I'm sorry, I'm getting all my titles wrong today. Maya Yanika. He's a sex addict. And he's been on a drive to probably have sex with most women that he interacted with. And, I don't know if that's still the case. I'm not up to date on his mental health or his behavior. But since the aughts, since all of this started, that has been a consistent message. That feedback, I don't know that he would own that he wants to fuck every woman once, but that's how it went. And so ISTA, as a temple arts and place around sex positivity, sex and spirituality, it really served him. And he was able to do that and, have those quote unquote needs met. And then I think because it's in his imprint, of course, the people that came in, a lot of women and men facilitators that showed up in the beginning, they adopted that. That was condoned. It was passed on. And watching here many years later, people I've known that go multiple times or move into apprenticeship facilitatorship, it's like watching that spread. It's like watching narcissistic traits spread. Or as we've found now, how power really does reduce in our brains our capacity for empathy. And I think that we see that, or I've seen that.
It's kind of making me think of David Berg and the Children of God, who had, as far as sort of these twisted sexual preferences, and preached free love, open love in a time where people were very conservative, reaching out to young people in the counterculture, like free love, open love, everybody is going to have sex with everybody and we're going to explore ourselves. And now the women have to go out and sleep with non-members and bring back money and things for the group. And now everybody's actually going to also have sex with the children because we're all about open love and free love. So it starts off as like this really radical, interesting idea, with the man at the top having sort of an idea of where he really would like things to go for his own twisted sexual pleasure. I don't know if it's the same case here, but it's kind of given me the same sort of, I don't know, same sort of vibe.
Yeah, I don't think Dez is in the category of a Berg as far as the just, I mean, what a horrible, horrible individual, right? I mean, the child abuse is just outrageous and stunning and horrific. I think he's more of like the playboy, and he's compelled. I think it is like possibly, unhealthy. But to my knowledge, it's, I don't know. I can't really defend it, but we're dealing with adults, I guess. I have an issue with, just to jump to it, that ISTA has a fund called the Leah Fund that is named after a woman who committed suicide in New Zealand. And that fund is targeted at bringing in other young women or young people who ends up being women. And so there is this angle where I feel like ISTA targets vulnerable people. They have the Veterans Fund, bring in vets who would be really vulnerable to re-traumatization, and then bringing in these, really young women, and then some of them end up, dating or hooked up with facilitators, and that I find that really gross.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Yeah. I see, kind of not on the same level as Berg. I just always I think this is one of the age-old questions that people ask all the time. Did they start this group kind of like with an idea of what they were trying to achieve for their own sexual gains? And I'm not sure if that's the case here, but I think it might have played a part if he was a sex or is a sex addict.
I agree. I think it did create it for his gains under the guise of making the world better and empowering women. Though I think that ends up being upside down. I think there's you are being freed by letting yourself be the goddess of the temple, which means you'll fuck everybody because everything's love and you don't need to have any personal preferences because you're channeling divine femininity. And those are not exactly their words, but that's kind of where it lands in us.
Oh, that's so nefarious, isn't it? As women, we spend our whole lives. I mean, I'm speaking for myself as a woman. I mean, maybe not all women feel this way, but I, as a woman, feel like you spend your life waiting for liberation, for safety, for autonomy. And that, I'm in a happy and healthy and loved household. But that doesn't mean, if I go to a workplace, I'm going to feel that same way. Or if I go and join a sports club, I'm going to feel the same way. Or even in the gym, for example, or going for a run on the streets, and I'm like, well, now I feel a bit unsafe, even though I'm out in public and there's loads of cars going past me. I'm still feeling like, I feel like as women, we wait for that day where we feel that's and to be offered that, sexual freedom and autonomy and safety. We're going to learn about consent. Oh, that's like double evil.
Well, and there's these like beautiful rituals, and I'm kind of a ritualist, or I enjoy, group rituals, whether it's singing together, dancing. Of course, there's the breath work. But as the retreat went on, there was like the brotherhood circle where the men and the women separated, and the men came back, and the women were witnesses, and we were brothers in sisters' bodies was the idea, and that we're holding that masculine. And men were incredibly vulnerable and very, I mean, it was really compelling for me to see them in their articulating the shaming, the harms, the abuse, the neglect, the burdens, expectations of manhood, boyhood through manhood.
Yeah.
And so it created a real intimacy and hope. And then the women were in the center, another day or in the afternoon. And the men were sisters in men's bodies. And just even that concept that I was like, oh, these men are, really trying on our bodies. They are feeling into what it is to be feminine, and they're witnessing us. They're shutting up and seeing what we have to share. And I put so much into that. And, part of what I've recognized about myself is a tendency towards zealotry, I guess, where I like to go all in. I want to believe, I want to amplify. And mostly, in the world, I kind of have a good measure on that. But when I'm putting myself into these containers, where we're doing a bunch of cathartic, emotional release, being a baby again and doing like reparenting with people. And I'm really earnest. I'm kind of like the A student in this way that I'm like, oh, I want to succeed and I want to probably prove myself. And so I, I see in myself where that probably as an adult, I'm except within myself or maybe my family, I just probably don't get to feel like that. There isn't really anything in the adult world where I get to think I'm that safe. And that's really, I think, part of maturing. And yeah, it's a bittersweet insight.
It is. I imagine as well, being a mum of two teens, that it makes it even more bittersweet because you're having these revelations in understanding that your children might also feel like they can never truly be safe or truly express themselves in that same way. And I mean, I'm an optimist. I'm an ever optimist. So I hope that there's a day where that can be the experience of young people. But also I am definitely the type of person that like wants everybody to like me. And if somebody's like cold towards me, I take that personally. I'm like, what should I do? How can I change their opinion? And even if it's somebody that I don't particularly like, I'll go above and beyond to try and match their energy or try and make myself fit around them. And it's usually to my detriment. But for some reason, I don't know if it's like a childhood thing that I've brought forward, but in those types of situations that you've described at this first retreat, that would not serve me well in this type of environment. I would be like, people would be looking at me saying, that one there, she is vulnerable and we can get her hook, line and sinker.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And I do think it is a lot of how we're enculturated as women to be bridge makers, to make the peace, to keep things from escalating. I mean, there's just a lot of messages about our role. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just curious to know whether some of these experiences that you had at the first retreat that perhaps maybe didn't feel as safe as some of the other experiences, did they feel familiar from past cultic experiences, or did you not realize perhaps the similarities at the time between previous experiences and this first retreat?
Yeah, it wasn't until probably after the third retreat and finding the Facebook group of which is what turned me into the activist. I don't think I made the connections, and I think that's part of why it was really devastating when I did, because I was like, oh no, not only is this dream actually a nightmare, but I've done this over and over. And so that was just really psychologically painful.
Was the second retreat or the third retreat particularly different from the first?
Absolutely. So in the first, of course, it was my first retreat and I was a participant. And for my second retreat, it was also level 1, but I went as an assistant. And so part of the path to become a facilitator, let's say maybe I thought it would be pretty cool to sit on the couch and teach people and make a lot of money and travel the world and have sex with who I wanted to. So I inquired, and it was like, well, you would do some assisting and then a facilitator would take you as an apprentice. And so I'm like, all right, let's start assisting. And so
Then they tell you there's no sick pay, so you're like, oh, well, in that case, yeah, I don't know if it's for me.
well, I was obviously not looking for a conventional job at the time. And so, it's one of the situations where assistants actually pay to go, even though you're working pretty hard. It's a slight reduction in cost, a major increase in labor. And so you go and you are the anchors for like the small groups that meet every day. So every morning we'd have a small group meeting and it's led by a pod leader. And so the assistants are the pod leaders. And they told us, you are the real carriers of the culture. You're the ones that really anchor that. And there's a bunch of rooms setting up, timekeeping, the pod management, team meetings where you're talking about how are people in your group doing? Are there any red flags? And then you're also participating in a lot of the activities. So it's really intense. And there was a sense of urgency all the time. Like, we don't have enough time to do it. And you better, do it fast, but take care of yourself, but be on top of it. And one of the facilitators snapped at me during a ritual when I caught them on their phone during like this peak activity of pretty intense shamanic sexual engagement. And I was like, I looked over and all the facilitators were on their phones and it was like so blasé. And to me, the narrative I was like, this is super sacred and we're in temple and this is like magical and, fuck your phones. And I went and asked a question that kind of interrupted and I got snapped at. And I also did one of the demonstrations that was they would have the facilitators or assistants do a transmission before each activity, which was a demonstration, right? And so I had done this demonstration and then the facilitator had really not followed up with me and I'd asked for support afterwards and they forgot, didn't have time. And so at the end of the retreat, we had a debrief session where all the assistants and facilitators get together and you're invited under 5 minutes to give feedback and or ask for feedback. And there was this sense of, or they said quite specifically, the sooner we do this, the sooner we can get out of here. But also we want to give you time and space. And it was really funny because I hadn't known it was going to happen. And I started sweating and my pulse was racing. And I realized I was questioning, am I going to just be an ass kisser or am I actually going to bring up my concerns? And the whole thing is about being sovereign and responsible. And I was like, oh, I'm going to challenge myself. And I'm going to say, hey, you guys, we're on your phones and you let me down. And then you get to decide what level of feedback do you want back. Are you feeling tender and you only want a 1? Or are you feeling really brave and powerful and you want a 10? So I'm the asshole, of course, is like, I'm here. I paid good money. It's been a week. I'm going to take a 10. Like, give it to me. So I share my feedback. The room goes silent. The lead facilitator turns around and says, I call bullshit. Do you see how you're making it our responsibility to take care of you when you're a full-grown adult and you could have asked for your needs to be met at any time? Do you see how you're making us the offender and yourself a victim when really it's the other way around? And which is DARVO, right? Defend, attack, and reverse victim and offender. And like so many of us, I totally took it in, like taking a punch, and was like, oh my God, you're right. It is all my fault. I am responsible for everything. And it got even a little, pettier, where it's like, you should go home and look at your life and any places that you're not succeeding. This is probably the cause. And weren't you the temple priestess? That last altar was ugly. Why did it have dead flowers on it? So it's just so but I left saying, oh my God, thank you for being, giving me the dark feedback and fawning, right? Basically fawning.
Yeah. And so many times in my head, I'm like, I'm going to tell you now that I'm not happy about this. And in my head, I'm having a conversation and then the moment passes and I don't say anything. And then I'll lay in bed and I'll have the argument with myself later on that night when I'm trying to get to sleep. And this is how it would have gone. And I would have told you and you would have heard me. But the phone thing, do you think this is like I'd rather doom scroll on my phone and look at social media, or is it that the leaders are also under so much pressure to have all of this work done and reach out to contact and organize things that they actually can't be present because they have that pressure, those deadlines? I always try and think about the coercive nature of all people, apart from the real bad guy at the tippy top of the pyramid. Don't have much empathy for that person a lot of the time, but anybody kind of filtering down in that hierarchy, I always try and take a look and think what's happening to them in that moment. Keeps me compassionate, otherwise I'm far too quick to say what an asshole.
That's interesting. My sense was that that it was kind of old hat,
right?
Like, it's going well, we've done this a million times, we travel around the world, we don't have to be that present in this moment. Is that accurate? I don't know. Were they actually at work on things or responding to urgent needs, or dealing with pressure to prepare for the next thing? I don't know, but that wasn't the impression I got.
Yeah. I also wonder, when this person gave you the level 10 feedback, if he'd been on the receiving end of that before, after going through the same processes that you were then going through.
So it was a she.
Oh, sorry. Yes, she.
All right. No. I just think it's interesting,
It's interesting that I'm like, well, but if they're talking to you like that, must be a guy.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, this is coming out of the 60s and encounter groups, I think, in terms of tough love, dark feedback, shadow work, all of these languages for basically being really unkind to someone in their best interest, or based on, but it shuts you down. It makes you small. It absolutely undermines the thing that there is the opposite of the thing they're saying it's doing. And that's endemic. I mean, that's Osho, that's Scientology
Yeah.
all over.
The kind of public humiliation, ritualistic humiliation aspect of kind of keeping you it's a control tactic, isn't it? The fear, intimidation, and humiliation are compounded, and then you're like, okay, well, you're in charge. And the loaded language of the word transmission. I mean, there must be a lot of language in this where if I went and walked into a session, I'd be like, wow, I don't understand what you're talking about. Whoa, look at that. Oh my gosh, you'll have to send me a picture of that.
Send you a photo. It's probably backwards on your screen, but this is my mind map of ISTA and Haydn from like what brought us in, searching for love and freedom and hope over there, to coercive harms, you know, all the things. So there's a lot of special language. Sorry, there's a lot of special language, insider language, that comes out slowly over time, and it gets more intense when you go to level 2 or as you become an assistant or an organizer, because I think like so many coercive groups or high pressure groups, the outer offering is the tip of the iceberg, right? It's and so many people go through ISTA. One might even say, I think the statistics like 60%, 70% only do one, and they're good and they move on. Landmark has a 50% return rate. That I think that was like the highest from John Hunter, his work. And so ISTA, I think, has a 30% return rate. What I don't know is how many of those people don't just go one more time, but go 3 more times. People on the internet are like, I've been 7 times, I've been 14 times. And so that's where, and those are the folks that are more inside. But I would say that it's the first level retreat, it's a much more subtle and it's when you get inside that it gets more overt and more pressured, and that's
Right.
Facilitator, more harsh feedback, more pressure.
Yeah. So kind of like the into the funnel, the love bombing aspect, and then once you're hooked, it then turns into, well, we've done all of this for you, so now you need to do this for us.
I think really it's the getting hooked on getting high and the peak experience. And then you're, because you're using breath work. So I'm someone who's really sensitive to that. And I get super high, whatever the dopamine release process is. I'm seeing visions. I feel great. I'm full of energy because I'm probably hypomanic. I'm like an Energizer bunny. And, that's what John Hunter's research showed, is that by the end of your 3 to 5 to 7 day retreat, where you've had pressure, all this deep psychological work, that you have a dopamine defense mechanism, and it is part of trying to keep yourself safe. And part of that is getting grandiose and being really big and being really confident and things that we love to feel that way. I love to feel that way. And so I was like, I'll keep going. I'll get to feel that way. I can help other people feel that way. Let's feel this way all the time. It's a little addictive.
Yeah. I mean, that's how people describe taking drugs. If I have too much coffee, my eyeballs start vibrating, that kind of thing. But then obviously when the coffee wears off, it's worse than it was before. The fatigue is worse than it was before the coffee. So that leads me into my next question, which does kind of link into Dr. John Hunter's work. What were the gaps like in between? Was there a come down period? Was there like a sense of urgency in getting on the next retreat? And did it differ between the first, second, and third?
Yeah. So I was super excited when I signed up to assist. And then I was good. I went back 6 months later to do level 2, sexual shamanic spiritual initiation. So it's the initiation versus the experience. Um, and I hit the peak between. I think I kind of held on to it's going to come. And I stayed connected to some of the people we created a chat group. So there was still a sense of kind of connection and growing friendships and yeah, being part of it. And that, the more I did it, the more I'd be in the in group and that desire to be there. Um, After level 2, which we can go into, but it was after level 2 that the high didn't last as long, and I was signed up to go again in 6 months. And the reason I did every 6 months was that's when they came to my location. So I wasn't traveling around the world to Peru or Colombia or New Zealand, or they're all over the world.
Well, shamanic hotspots, it sounds like almost.
Well, and then they're breaking into some other like states that are, you would think, more conservative. And of course, I think that they're really popular though in those because of the repression and the excitement. Uh, we had a young man who's getting out of the Mormon church show up at our first one. I mean, you just think about how mind blowing that was. There's nudity and there's yeah, just a lot of practices that would really be overwhelming. So the depression or the big drop was the facilitator who Darvoed me posted on Facebook, and she was writing about, I know there's, some feedback and, things are difficult. And then this Facebook group formed. And her message was rather unclear, but it mentioned this Facebook group. And I went and looked, and it was called Issues with ISTA and Haydn. We haven't talked about Haydn yet. And I was an early person to find it. And I said, hey, I'm, happy with ISTA, but I really want to learn about the harms because maybe I can be a bridge to make things better. And so very optimistically and naively got in the group and was horrified by the accounts of harm that people were sharing that went back a decade or more. And, in some cases it was horrifying because it would be a woman saying like, I take responsibility for that. I consented to this and I still feel hurt. Can we work on it? And being shut down, even from being like, I'm not even trying to blame you, but I still have feelings. Can we process them? And by one lead facilitator, the response, was like, well, I don't have time for this. I'm teaching, but don't bring it up because it'll harm my reputation. And, just a lot of victim blaming and not being available for repair and making people wrong for having been hurt, for feeling hurt. And denial, right? Just all of that. And it was coming up in these accounts of that people had. And I at first was like, well, I wasn't harmed. And then I thought, oh, I had that weird experience with the facilitator. And so I wrote it out and said, hey, and it was funny because I reread it and I was like, I feel like I'm breaking the rule of no gossip. And maybe I shouldn't talk about, and if you think I'm being inappropriate, please give me feedback. Like, I was still obviously so inside the mindset. And I shared it and someone wrote back like, hey, you didn't deserve it. That's not great behavior by leaders of an organization. And in fact, it's called Darvo. And I think reading the description of Darvo, that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, just devastated and depressed and ashamed and angry. And I became very dysregulated, obsessive, dropped out of coaching school. Yeah, so I did take care of myself by getting a therapist, and doing my best to keep going, which led into the activist work, which I think was a way to really funnel the weird and dysregulated energy that I did have. I was pretty obsessive on researching the history of the organization, the players. I was, very hypersensitive and overwhelmed at the time. But through writing and the Issues with ISTA group, I got invited to meet with the admins of the Facebook group and then said, hey, we're working on a strategy of how to engage with ISTA as a survivor. Would you like to join us? And I said yes, speaking specifically with Lolita Diaz, who was anchoring that group. But I was like, also just like, I don't have the capacity to do a lot of critical thinking. Like I can show up here, but I'm in an emotional state. And, it was Lolita who really set the direction of, can we engage with this from a transformative justice perspective? And that was informed by the fact that we collected reports through the Issues with ISTA Facebook group and a Google form that we put out to survivors. And we received about 54 reports. A couple of them we had to throw out for various reasons, but we, had over 40 some reports that we analyzed. And in there was only one account initially that, people wrote narratives, so it's hard sometimes to really get the information. We didn't have like a great categorization, was like analyzing their narratives. And so most of them were not sexual assault. They were coercion, high pressure group behaviors, and different kinds of consent violations, whether it's, being told you can't leave the room for high pressure, or trauma-inducing or reactivating activities was the other one. And I think because we didn't have data in there that really was going to allow us to go to the police with any kind of a truly criminal, especially in a sex positive perspective, right? That becomes very nuanced and complicated to work, though we are seeing changes now with how Nicole Daydon's been handled by the U.S. court system, and the fact that she's in jail and probably going to face multiple years. So we are seeing a shift that there is still the sex positive, and they didn't turn on the victims in that case. So that's hopeful. But at the time, we really didn't have the kinds of things that a lawyer was going to be able to work with. And so we thought, how do we, Lolita and the team was like, how do we take this information and leverage it to cause transformation, change, reduction of harms within ISTA? And I was like, that's where my heart is. I had a lot of hope, as people before me and so have had, that like, oh, this is the time that we can turn the ship around. If we could just present the data, get to the right people, they will see the error of their ways and, of course, wish to make corrections. And that's like the optimist and maybe projecting my own goodness onto people who aren't there. But I also felt it was really important to give them the opportunity, because I can't really say you weren't willing to change if we didn't engage in a process where we had that conversation and you did or didn't change. And just to cut to the end, ISTA did not change enough. The cultic bubble of beliefs has not changed, even though some actions were taken.
Or some language has been altered so that it doesn't sound, like you mentioned, they'd taken out facilitators can touch people or participants in a sexual way?
Right. So that one, at least for level 1, verbally, but not in writing, is confirmed that facilitators and assistants won't interact in level 1 sexually with participants.
That is such a roller coaster. It sounds as well like you've experienced a lot of grief in finding out that this was really not what you believed and hoped that it would be. The devastation of finding a community and a sense of freedom and a sense of safety, and then finding out that that was not the case. It must just break your heart. And you have to mourn that in some ways. You have to be like, well, that's not in my life anymore. It's dead and gone, and that's hard.
Yeah, it was it just took me all the way down. Like nothing's really crushed me the way that did, where my spiritual beliefs, my belief in myself, my sense of self-trust, my trust of others, the shame. I mean, just incredible, excruciating experience of shame beyond anything I could have imagined in the past. And then working through listening to Cult Vault and listening to other podcasts and reading the books and following the experts. I've been listening obsessively and watching all the films, since that happened. And my therapist at one point was like, you have to cut yourself off because you're really just reactivating yourself every time. And there was, I'm luckily past that point, but there was a place where, ironically, it was almost the same kind of dysregulation that I got because it's a really intense emotional state. And so I was like, oh, this is me needing to have a different relationship with my own, emotional process.
Yeah. It's so tricky, that finding the balance between the race to get to the end of the healing journey. Yes, let's just do it all now in one go. I'm going to read all these books in one day and I'm going to be healed. That's it, done. There's that to kind of reconcile with, but there's also the element of the psychoeducation, right? The more you learn, the more you understand. Like hearing the term Darvo described to you and realizing in that moment, wow, that's what happened to me. It is dysregulating, but it's so empowering at the same time. And that kind of fluctuation between understanding through language what happened to you, but also needing to cut back on that because it's really, again, devastating to go and understand that those processes were put onto you. It's hard to find. It's hard to find that balance. It's impossible, right? That's why everybody talks about how different their healing journeys are.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing I would say is, whatever shortcut I was looking for with ISTA, I didn't get the shortcut. I feel more healed now, though I still have, a moments of PTSD and overwhelm and just needing to take a lot of time and space, even from the activist perspective or, engaging with parts, because I just have realized that I'm a little more tender, and sensitive and rebuilding, and that there isn't a shortcut to that. It's, there's just not a shortcut.
ISTA has marketed itself as a path to spiritual sexual healing, but now has some serious and substantiated through survivor testimonies allegations against them of sexual harm, sexual misconduct. And this website that you forwarded me, Safer Sex Positive and Spiritual Communities, or 3SC, which I'll put a link to in the episode description, is something that is being used as a platform to try and hold ISTA accountable. So it says here on the website, safer sex positive and spiritual communities, and then it says starting with ISTA. So first of all, is there plans to look into other groups like One Taste, for example, that market themselves as a path to spiritual sexual healing or female empowerment, but actually turn out to be doing the opposite of that? And what else can you tell us about this particular platform in regards to, I mean, you've just talked there about trying to work with ISTA and it wasn't successful. They didn't change. So I'm guessing that all came through this website as well.
Yeah. So from the issues with ISTA and Hide-In Facebook group, it's not a great name. It's a mouthful. So we adopted the name, 3SC. And the website was like, how do we have a public place to document our journey? And of course, the fantasy is that things will go well. And this could be a roadmap for other organizations in terms of saying, hey, let's try this other approach. In some, it's had to do with being transparent and not being limited to Facebook. And so there's a timeline on there that I think is a great place to start for people who are interested in the journey. And it really tracks our communications, decision-making. It's very wordy for those of you who don't, want really long posts. But there was a feeling of really wanting to be nuanced and be articulate and specific and name, what we were up to. And I do think it still can be a roadmap for, why some of these things may not work. I felt really comforted when I met with Carol Murchison, the lawyer, Carol. And
big love for Carol, big love. We'll just send a little heart out to Carol into the universe.
And she said, and I was like, well, I spent 2 years trying to change it. And she was like, I spent 4. And then I talked to, Chris Shelton or John Atack, and they're like, yeah, I spent 2 or I've spent 10. Or if you think about it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, a lot of people like myself who are very caring and we're really excited about the mission or the possibility, we will turn around and try to make it better. And in all those cases, I don't think any of us have actually succeeded.
Not with the group that you're trying to work with explicitly, but in networking and working with survivors, when I think about John Atack, I think about, he's definitely impacted Scientology in a way that's positive for us and perhaps not so positive for Scientology themselves. But the amount of people that he's helped with that ripple effect is incredible. I mean, we'll never really know the reach of John's work or Chris's or John's, John Hunter. There's all these amazing, incredible people that you've mentioned in this episode. So, we might not be able to take Scientology down, but some other networks and groups and exploitative individuals will crumble because of the work that all of you are doing collectively, or all of us, I should say, are doing collectively. There's just so much admiration from me to all of these people, including yourself, for all of the work. It's incredible, and it helps when the work can get overwhelming and depressing, and you can feel like you don't want to do this anymore, and then you take a little bit of time away, then you chat with somebody like John and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm inspired again, let's go.
And I think that loops back to your pointing out on our mission, starting with ISTA. I need to update that because I think we're thinking of this as more of either a project of having worked with ISTA and a case study as a small volunteer team, don't have the capacity to invest this kind of time, energy, care, heartbreak into engaging with other organizations. And so making it more of an educational site, and that's why it really matters. And then also for those people who might think they want to go to ISTA, and someone directs them to the site, and they can say, wow, these people are not just, being reactive and angry. They spent 2 years in face-to-face talks with a mediator. They created documents. They did really heavy lifting to we could have been paid as consultants for thousands of dollars for the work that we did for free to try to reduce harms and to have survivors' needs met. And those are places that have failed. They're requiring NDAs of survivors that have non-disparagement agreements. That comes up in the New York Magazine piece that I think you alluded to, and which we should basically say has an account of rape and a ritual that ISTA went on in their response to deny it as rape, and to make excuses that there was some kind of a consent that superseded this woman's experience. So I think we need to name that's how bad, right, it is, and that one of the facilitators, whether at ISTA or not, has been accused multiple times of drugging young women in Israel and having sex with them. He's no longer in the organization, but there's still huge ties between them. I mean, I think we have had an impact on ISTA. Collectively, there are other activists at work, which I think is also interesting to mention. We chose a particular path that a lot of people said was doomed for failure, and it made them very upset. And some of them are just our critics. And then others have been like, hey, we want to take a different approach. And they've done things like letter writing campaigns and reaching out to potential participants and trying to warn them, and trying to get venues to shut them down, right? Or hold the venue accountable for holding a group that's going to cause harm. And we said we weren't going to take those tactics. But I will tell you that part of getting us to the table was the fact that other activists were acting in other ways. And I just want to do a shout out for activism as an ecosystem. And instead of turning on each other and criticizing each other when we're trying to make things better, if we could say, wow, you're playing a different role and you're taking a different approach. And it makes me really clear that this is the role I want to take, because I'm tired of being attacked about it from people who, assuming we're on the same side, we're calling about as harmful.
Right. Yeah. It's I call it the survivor community minefield. It's so tricky to navigate. You have to be like almost two different people depending on who you're talking with, in terms of some people don't like Steve Hassan's work, for example. So if I have a talk with Steve Hassan, I can't then go and tell certain survivor community groups that I've had a talk with Steve Hassan, because that would really upset them, and then they don't want to work with me anymore. So it's like you have to really work out how to become a neutral space almost. It's so political, and there's so much gatekeeping. And at the end of the day, I think to myself, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We're all trying to help survivors. We're all trying to heal, and we're all trying to hold exploitative individuals to account. We just want them to take accountability and to stop harming people. And I think, you've mentioned there that ISTA got people to sign NDAs, that they had contradictory public responses to what the 3SC, as in yourself and your team, were putting out to the public, or what was being said on the Facebook group. And to have survivors fighting amongst each other almost gives more credibility to ISTA when they deny those public responses, because if people come to your Facebook page for information and all it is people yelling at each other on what they think is the right thing to do, that is detrimental to the activist process. And I always talk about Scientology in this way because the Scientology survivor community is really difficult to navigate. It's contentious. It's tricky. And I think to myself, Scientology are going to take one look at the ex-Scientology community and probably say, wow, well, they're all too busy fighting amongst themselves to worry about what we're doing here. So that's really good for us. And even using the infighting as an example to Scientologists to say this is what it looks like if you leave. And that's not nice to look at. It's not, and I know that not every survivor community is going to be like this, but I always talk about the minefield and how hard it is to navigate. And I think you're so right in what you've just said. We can all work at it differently, but in a collaborative way. We can all, I say this about podcasting as well, because gatekeeping is rife in the podcasting community, but if me and 10 other podcasters could talk about the same cult or cultic group in an episode, and every episode would be different because we're all different podcasters. And survivors are very much the same way, and they're going to take this approach and I want to take that approach and I'd like to do this and let's work together to do that. And it doesn't mean that, you going and doing one type of activism is going to prevent somebody from doing their type of activism. Actually, if we're all doing different things, it culminates into a bigger and better process. I'm just on a soapbox now, but you can tell, Cara, that this has been getting to me for the last 5 years.
Oh, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, Kacey, because I've felt pretty alone, in being like, wait a minute. It's funny because it's like, I'm in ISTA, or I identify with ISTA. Oh, I identify as a survivor. But then there's a group of survivors who are using some of the same shaming, coercion, blaming on other survivors because they're not doing it the way they want to do it. And we're all imperfect. Like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do even what I set out to do perfectly. And yet the doing something other than apathy or sitting in the cheap seats and throwing eggs at the people who are on the field actually, engaged in the hard work of talking to people that you're really angry at. I mean, that was just an experience for me as a human to be like, I'm sitting in this Zoom room with people that I want to rip my hair out. I want to sit and scream at them. And yet there's no productive conversation that starts with me unleashing my emotional rage on them. And so, what is our responsibility to at least attempt civil discourse? And I understand some of the suspicions of our group based on, other members had friends or connections within ISTA. And so there was a sense that we were just a whitewashing machine. And so that people were really suspicious. And I recognize that. And yet I've also learned in the process, as I'm sure you've learned with your voice and your platform, is like, it's not my job to respond to every one of your accusations. It's not my job to prove myself to you as a fellow survivor in that way. That's just as much as me trying to prove that I'm good enough within the cult. And I'm just not here to do that anymore. And
yeah,
I appreciate you saying that it is a minefield. And I recognize it when I was also hypersensitive, so raw. It was hard to talk to anybody without getting triggered, without misinterpreting it, and with paranoia, and
yeah.
right. So it is really
think that's another tricky thing, though, isn't it? Another minefield, if you will. This fear, intimidation, humiliation, and paranoia that is cultivated in the group those are things that people carry with them post cultic experience or involvement. So, it, it's hard to and trauma. I think trauma is the most important thing when it comes to the survivor communities. It's not that people shouldn't be heard or that people shouldn't express themselves. I think it's just understanding that everybody is going to these spaces with trauma, and everybody is expressing themselves and experiencing that trauma in a different way. How we accommodate for all of that noise and still remain compassionate towards one another, that's the key. I mean, obviously, I don't know the answers to that. I could probably cultivate world peace if I knew the answer to that. But it's hard because you recognize that everybody is going through something. There's a spectrum. It could be a small thing. It could be a big thing. Everybody is experiencing their own trauma differently, and that is really what's rearing in these survivor communities. The distrust and the paranoia and the humiliation. These are all things I think that are cultivated and groomed within the cultic environment, are carried outside and then continue. There's so much work we have to do on ourselves to recognize those things, to recognize when we're doing those things, and to kind of almost like regroom ourselves, or I should say coach ourselves is a better way to say it, into changing those habits. And that is really hard because it's ingrained at that point, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, if we were going to do that kind of work, one of the things I would say is we can't do large group awareness trainings, like any of that dealing with trauma, relational group dynamics, sexuality. People say, well, where do I go if I can't go to ISTA? Because there's a demand for us to be able to heal and create and connect in these ways. And we posted on the website, we don't have an answer. We can't tell you where to go. We're not going to promote anybody, but here's a series of questions to really consider about what your motivation is, what you want to get out of it. And then just saying, especially if it's involving sexuality, don't go to a large group training. Don't go to something with, I would say do one-on-one or, 2 or 3. I would say like you deserve the attention and the, to move smoothly at your pace in a real way. Or, find sex positive communities and small trainings but be very careful of putting yourself in these large group containers because of the social impact, right, that we talked about in the beginning.
So, in conclusion, really, if you're exploring sacred sexuality, shamanism, or tantra, do so with trained, licensed professionals, transparent programs, and structures that prioritize consent and safety. True consent, as true as you can find. ISTA, based on available evidence, fails to meet those necessary standards. So if you are considering it, and you're listening to this episode, I would say consider this a big red flag. Big red flag. We're waving it. Look elsewhere.
Yeah, I have to say that's the case. Yeah.
When you think about other people in the survivor community that have experienced ISTA or something similar to ISTA, whether that is like one taste or landmark, all the different kind of areas that ISTA might fit into when you're looking at cultic groups. What would you say to survivors that are going through their own healing process and trying to reconcile with themselves, trusting themselves again, trusting others again, trying to find or trying to find the confidence to explore safely their sexuality and sexual spaces? Do you have any advice that you would give to people that are going through all of these things?
I mean, I can speak to what's worked for me, and it's been one-on-one therapy weekly with a licensed therapist. I did go on to antidepressants a couple months into, discovering it, because I was just so messed up. And I had been very scared about using antidepressants. I was kind of in the world of like, I should be able to manage it all through my amazing brain. It's all my fault that I feel bad, like just layers of shame that got in the way. And so it was a really big deal for me to say, hey, I'm going to accept help for this period. And time. And then I've really found so much good in small survivor groups. And they haven't all been just ISTA survivors. I kind of find that difficult to navigate, being both a survivor and then the activist and then feeling. So I'm working on that to see who wants to show up. But I've participated in like Rachel Bernstein's, survivor groups. And it's just amazing. And there is something that happens to my nervous system where I feel so safe. None of these people are judging me. Everybody's dealing with their own battle. And it's like my body recognizes that these people are not a threat, I guess, or, we have something really in common. I have a t-shirt that I want to make that says all the best people join cults and leave them. And it's, because as Carol Murchison says, like, you have really pro-social behaviors. You're trusting. You want to make the world better. You want to belong. And those are beautiful pro-social behaviors that get manipulated, captured by coercive groups.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say actively identified and they're like almost recruitment. I think what I'm trying to say is I think those personality traits are identified in people and then are exploited by cult leaders. People want to have loyal people, smart people, confident people, hardworking people. These are all, again, pro-social traits that I think are identified by cult leaders and people in leadership and con artists and abusive individuals in our lives, bosses or husbands or fathers or whatever, and they take those pro-social parts of you and they're like, I can exploit those traits for my own personal gain, which is really sad.
It is. And I think there's two flavors. I'd be curious about your thought on this, Kacey. I think there's the Des Nichols, where there's probably some kind of a sex addiction, but I don't think he's so much of a power player, in that he brought in other leaders and he brought in Bruce Lyon. And we haven't talked about Haydn, but there's this connection between ISTA and Haydn. They're super intermingled. They cannot separate from each other, no matter what their mouth noises are about that. But I think that Bruce, based on reports from those that have known him, he is more of the conscious or manipulative, or I think he would identify it consciously, and I think other people identify it unconsciously. Does that make sense? Like they're not saying, oh, that's the confident one. They're reacting to the feeling of, oh, that's the one I should target next.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's different when people are indoctrinated and then deployed to the streets and told, look for people that fit these characteristics. But obviously in a workshop setting, you might be looking around as a perpetrator for somebody that fits a certain model or exhibits certain behaviors. I think you're definitely right in that way. But something that Laura Richards said to me on a panel the other day when we were at CrimeCon together is that people that are sexually abusive, sexually exploitative, it's not because of the sex, it's because of the power. It's always about control. So, David Berg, in his predatory way, it was still about control. And I would argue that ISTA, claiming to be about, safety and consent and sexual freedom, is actually about controlling people, at least when you look at the leadership.
I would say especially, I think Des had a vision that why can't we all just get along and everybody can have sex and it would be beautiful and it's all love and it's all light and genuinely it would be like, that's really my vision and intention. Bruce Lyon and Hayden Temple, just to mention that the temple training is 6 weeks, ISTA's about a week. But if you go to Hayden and you do their temple training, that's 6 weeks. And Bruce very much owns his quote unquote spiritual lineage as coming from Alice Bailey, the Blavatsky lineage.
Okay.
Right? He's claiming that he's channeling the same entity, trans-Himalayan, whatever. I just can't. Anyway, so, he's in a lineage and he designed level 2, which is the initiation. And level 2, level 1 is like you're working through your personal stuff. This is the sex education you should have had in high school or college. Don't you wish, we'd all had this kind of healing? Level 2 is we're working on the energies of the world. This is the transpersonal or outer planets, if you're into astrology. It's beyond that personal. And I thought that was really exciting. I'm like, oh, I can tap into the grief of the world and try to, channel that or shift that into love of the world.
We can heal the world. We can make the world a better place. We're on a mission that's bigger than ourselves. Do you know what? That's really interesting that you've mentioned Blavatsky there, because we've talked a bit about the New Age stuff. When you're talking about astrology there, that feels more New Agey in how I understand it. But now the word initiation, and now you're talking about Blavatsky and esotericism. So that is all tying in very... that ties into my understanding of that side of esoteric teachings. And I think that's really interesting that you've got somebody that calls themselves Baba, as far as I understand.
So, well, yeah, Baba Des and then Bruce Lyon. And Bruce Lyon, yeah, right. So it's like a marriage of two angles of that, right? And so Bruce, I would say, is much more of our traditional cult leader archetype. And from the survivors I've talked to, very few will come public. And part of the fear is that they've entwined their spirits on these other planes with Bruce. And so he has access to them, might read their minds. Hugely charismatic, lots of galaxy brain. If you watch his YouTube, lots of, blah, 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 hypnotic nonsense. But having people, be under his thumb for 6 weeks or then join the larger community or stay or buy property now all over the world to land the temples to save the planet as part of the transition to 2030 or whatever. It's way more culty than ISTA, which I think has, some really bad teachings and learnings, and it ties together. But I think ISTA with 1 week is really a funnel to hide in for 6 weeks and the deeper community idea. And now ISTA and Hayden are claiming that they're different. Bruce and Des have parted ways and are feuding. And if there's been a letter and drama and, the feeling that Bruce really took over and pushed Des out and Des became the scapegoat for all the bad things. And so when we collected reports of harm, I will say the way we categorized them is we went through and counted up the individual harms and categorized them, and that Bruce Lyon had the highest count of harms. But when we engaged with ISTA and we provided information to Bruce, we had more information on ISTA, and as much as such a small team, we did not have the capacity to take on Bruce. And again, because fewer people will speak out, even now, there's a lot of silence around it, and it's a smaller number of people that have probably been impacted, but I think far more deeply.
Wow, that sounds particularly problematic. But again, goes back to the paranoia and the fear and the intimidation and humiliation that is carried from within the group to outside of the group. And people will be genuinely worried for their spiritual selves. And that for people that aren't spiritual, I think can be a really hard concept to grasp. Like when we're talking about religious and spiritual abuse or spiritual and ritualistic abuse, it can be really hard for people that don't have that spiritual self or haven't considered their spirituality or their religiosity to contemplate their like non-physical self, which can be just as harmed. Your spiritual self can be used as a tool of control, whether that's talking about your eternal soul or whether that's talking about your even generational ancestry stuff, your ancestral wounds or whatever people will use people will use anything to control you, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But I've got really one last question to ask before we sign off today. And that is, for somebody that has been interested in New Age, shamanistic, spiritual seeking in their life, how can you find that in today's age when there is so much con artistry, when there is so much exploitation, so many influencers online that claim to have, these guru, shaman, medicine people titles, but are just all there like to make a quick buck? How do you explore that, how do you seek safely? How do you seek safely, Cara?
Yeah, I mean, I would is the practitioner you're looking at, have they signed up for a Seek Safely pledge, right? Seek Safely is actually an organization that, came out of the death of a woman through James Ray. James Ray. Anyway, and their position is, we are seekers. I've had friends tell me, like, stop joining things, stop seeking. And I'm like, I actually don't know how to do that. Like it is part of me. Can I seek more safely? Can I seek safely? Way more now. I think the discernment of moving slowly, being educated about pressure techniques of sales, being educated is the best thing that we have. I also think that's really tricky because we often are attracted to or targeted by these groups when we're really vulnerable. And that's not a easy time to try to employ, these deep critical thinkings. And I know I was excited about it. I watched the film and I thought, oh, thank God this guy's not running it anymore, because he'd already stepped away. But I didn't think, oh, this is the guy that set the die in motion, honey, And so ways that we trick ourselves or lie to ourselves or, rationalize and justify I want to do it and I'm going to find a way to rationalize it. So I think there's how do we avoid them, but then how do we handle it when we're in one or need to get out of one? Because we might find ourselves in them. I talk to my kids about, you're really smart, you're really clever. Somebody's going to trick you one day. And it's not that you got tricked. It's that you don't let that undermine you. Like some teenagers that are, being targeted online and children, and they're being manipulated into giving compromising information. They get threatened and they commit suicide because they don't have the resilience. They don't understand about the shame. They don't have a time horizon that things can get better over time. So as adults, I think it's like, what's your game plan if you get tricked? Can we say like, oh shit, I got tricked, I need to get out, and so maybe we can't avoid the mistakes without playing. Maybe it is just risky by nature, but we can be educated. Don't go to a large group awareness training. Try to get some background. Try to get some second opinions. I finally have a friend where I send every website and they're like, this is ridiculous. What is it that you're, and I'm like, but they're so confident and they're promising this, that, and the other. And they're like, yeah, honey, which is all smoke and mirrors. It's an illusion. So don't give your power away. We're in an age of glam, influencers, the false confidence.
Yeah,
I would
prosperity teachings.
Manifestation. Look how I manifested it. And I just recommend actually doing your best, especially if you're someone like me who doesn't by nature super skeptical. Learn some skills around skepticalness. To not a word, but
skepticism.
That's the word.
It's usually me making words up. It's usually me going, just to explainify yourself.
And ideally, cultivate, if you're not a great skeptic, maybe you cultivate that in your life and you have a friend like I do now where I'm like, oh, you're my double check. And I really trust you. I have ways to reality test with diverse people. And that's a little vulnerable too. 'Cause like, oh, I want this thing and I'm going to, let you opine about it. But I think that, like you said, it's not that every sex positive community or group or meeting or even possibly a retreat is harmful. It's just that a lot are.
Yep, absolutely. And if something seems too good to be true, keep doing that digging, keep doing that due diligence as much as you can. I mean, you spent a year in conversations with ISTA, and they seem to have made some changes, but they have not made as many positive changes as perhaps they should have done. But think about all the public information there is now from yourself and others doing this work, that if you type ISTA into Google, you're going to find some of that information that perhaps wasn't out there when you went on your first retreat. And also, what I love is that one of the facilitators themselves shared the Facebook page, like, look, this type of stuff's being said about us. You might still be attending these retreats. You might be in the inner circle. If the facilitator themselves hadn't shared that. So there's the power of information control, people. This facilitator provided a leak. That leak led to the dam breaking, and here we are today with an activist talking about all the things that she has done to speak out about this exploitative group. So there you go, power of information.
And I will tell you that one of the leaders who's been around multiple years helped build it. She is leaving ISTA. The facilitator who Darvoed me is leaving ISTA. So some of us are like, it looks like a sinking ship, and the rats are fleeing. I think a few people have actually been disillusioned. I think other people are saving their skin. But what's important to know is that all of those people who are going to go on and facilitate are in general perpetuating the same harmful practices. And so be skeptical. If you find, someone with this in their background, or be willing to talk to them about how have you personally learned, what have you done differently, how do you take responsibility? Because what we found,
That's what you need on a t-shirt. Stay skeptical. Hashtag stay skeptical. That's what you need on a t-shirt. And also, I don't know if Lyons and Nichols would have gone their separate ways and had this kind of feud if this information didn't all come forward as well. So then again, it's the ripple effect. There's not the accountability that we would expect and hope to see as optimists and as people that just want, everything to be okay. But I think when you look at it all in black and white and things that have transpired since this activism started, there are definitely lots of positive changes that you hopefully can carry with you going forward in your own recovery.
Yeah, I think that often of them as seeds, and I thought of them as like seeds of light, that we got our report inside ISTA, and that all of the 70 or so facilitators and organizers were exposed to those reports of harm. So I'm like, oh, those are seeds that hopefully, if they're not sprouting yet, we know that sometimes it takes years and years to collect enough data to break the shelf, as Yanya would say, and come to have to deal directly with, oh, these were the red flags, or these are the things that really hurt me, the breadcrumbs that, come together. So thank you. Yeah, I do. I thought mediation would be 3 months. We thought we'll just get in there, we'll have these meetings because of ISTA's schedule, because of the degree of changes. It took over a year, and then a year of like chats and stuff. And I think it's worth, if you have friends in a cult, and to stay connected to them, to keep the lines of communication open, to not shame people who are trapped in those mindsets and dynamics, because it's really hard to come out, and we are shaming ourselves, and we've been shamed. And so if we can keep that compassion and kindness open, then if we get sucked in, it's easier to get out. And if it's easier to get out, if we build these skills and these muscles, and we're looking out for each other, these groups are gonna, just not be as powerful. How we meet the demand to have crazy spiritual experiences in a safe way, I don't know. I mean, I'm on that journey. I'm kept myself kind of isolated and taken a lot of time, and disconnected from a lot of the sex positive community, all these, as part of the healing journey. And so I would say, a lot of it just takes more time than we think, both to recover, but also to have the influence, the change, to reach the number of people a podcast like yours does, right? That's been your consistency, your dedication. And so the ripples are huge. So I do hope that we see ripples.
I think so. And it's an exciting time to be doing this work, because more and more of these types of patterns of abuse are being recognized faster, and things are becoming more publicly available quicker. And even age-old cases or decades of patterns of abuse in cases like with Russell Brand, who this guy kind of reminds me of. This Nichols guy, when I looked at a picture of him, kind of gave me Russell Brand vibes, or vice versa. I think even those decades old allegations are now being brought into the light. So hopefully we're in a period of positive change, even though sometimes the world sounds crazy with its conspiracies and its Donald Trump's.
Yeah, and I do think, as we said with Daydone, P. Diddy, even going after Neil Gaiman, that women are coming forward, and we're putting the shame where it belongs. I think that's a really big piece, is that we've been conditioned to be ashamed, and we've been shamed as women and as victims or survivors. And for us to have the growth power to say, I'm going to put the shame where it belongs, and it's on the perpetrator. and that we back each other up to do that, because it's really hard and we don't have the laws. But as all of this, like you said, is coming up, we're building the laws. And I will say, now that I'm in touch with Carol and other lawyers, if there are ISTA survivors that have criminal harms that have happened to them, there are people we can connect you with, and a criminal case is not outside of the possibility, nor a civil case. There are possibilities for civil cases as well. And so I do want that to get out there. We're done with this phase of the project. But by making all these connections, resources, getting educated, it doesn't mean it's the end of road of holding them accountable. They have huge financial infrastructure, all kinds of, organizational fraud. And so that's another place that they might be taken down. It's
absolutely. And, legal experts and lawyers, people like Carol, they know what spiritual and ritual abuse looks like, and they're really good at working with survivors of these types of environments who might walk into another solicitors or another law firm and explain their situation and have somebody kind of go cross-eyed and say, I don't know what you're trying, what's the criminality here. So, it's really amazing to have people like Carol and her team that understand these experiences, and you can go in and explain it to them and not have somebody say to you, I don't understand what you're asking me for. So, and that goes with therapists, trauma-informed therapists, cult-informed therapists, and just kind of building more and more of a network of frontline workers and experts and professionals that understand these nuanced areas as well. So, again, it's an exciting time. Things are changing, in some areas for better, in some areas for worse. It's just kind of slow going, and we have to keep doing the work as and when we can. But I'm so thankful for you, your work, your time, the website that you sent me. I'll put a link in the episode description to the 3SC website, and also to the news articles that are out about ISTA, the New York magazine, and The Cut, and a couple of other pieces that are out as well regarding ISTA. And so if anybody wants to check those out, then they can. And if you're thinking of joining ISTA, just don't.
Just don't.
Thank you so much, Cara, for your time today.
Thank you, Kacey.